recent Rathmines Bible School, it was decided, I guess, to add some variety into the evening sessions, that we would do a couple of panel evenings. We chose a couple of subjects, the first being parenting and the second one being discipleship. The goal of the evenings were to start a conversation, to get people talking about these very important subjects. And I think it's fair to say that this was achieved. Conversations were had by many and long into the evening. And we're pleased to bring you a record of these panel evenings, the first being parenting in the 21st century. Good evening, everybody. The good news is you're not hearing a talk about parenting from me tonight. So that's the good news. Better news is we've got a panel of brethren and sisters on the platform who've agreed to join us and talk about this very interesting topic. Before we start, though, it's appropriate that we open with prayer, and I'd ask you just to remain seated if you would, please, and we'll offer a word of prayer. Just a couple of words before we get involved. We've sort of deliberately chosen what I think is probably a challenging subject, and nobody on the platform here thinks they're a good parent, and I've yet to meet someone who thinks they're a good parent, so I just want to make that clear. Nobody on the platform volunteered to do this, so that's important as well to know. Everyone on the platform would rather be sitting where you're sitting right now. So I do want to extend a big thank you to those who have agreed to join us. It's not an easy thing to do. I guess as a panel tonight, we have to make a choice. And the choice is something like this. We could just say nice things and all the things that you want to hear, or we could dig it a bit deeper and be a little bit more challenging with what we say. I'd love to think we can do that. And I know that we'll probably say things that you may or may not agree with. So we're talking about principles and how we apply them. The principles are clear from the scripture, and we'll try and talk about those tonight if we can, and they form the basis. But how we apply it will be different for every person. So I guess I'm saying this just to ask you for your understanding that we're not going to be saying everything that you necessarily agree with. So I encourage everyone to speak their mind. I was trying to think of what the goal for tonight would be if we sat back at the end of tonight and thought, well, was it a good night or not? And I think for me, the goal of the night would be if we leave here and there's a whole bunch of conversations about how we can be better parents within the community. Not necessarily how you can be a better parent yourself, although that's obviously highly valuable. But I think the most important thing will be how, as a community, can we be a community of better parents, if that makes sense. So if we can start that conversation tonight, then that would be fantastic. I'm also mindful that in the audience tonight we've got a range of ages. We've got parents and we've got younger ones who are being parented, and we've got grandparents and we've got uncles and aunties. So we've got all sorts of different people. Everybody is involved in this discussion. And so you'll see on the platform here we've got young people like Dave, who are representing the young people, and others. So we try to get a range of people involved. So our panel tonight is, if you don't know them, Brethren Dion Patch, Austin Steele and David Mansfield, and the sisters Alex Russell, Tammy Carroll and Beck Weatherton. So perhaps we'll start with just some really brief introductions. My name's Stephen Dodson. I go to the Riverwood Ecclesia, which is nearby in Sydney. And I was asked to do this by the committee. That's why I'm here. And everyone else was asked by me. That's why they're here. So I might ask you to introduce yourself. Maybe start with Austin. Thanks.
I'll go first. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Austin. I go to the Riverwood Ecclesia. I honestly don't know why I'm up here because I have zero parenting experience. So hopefully you get some kind of insight on the life of the parented.
So I'm Alex Russell. I go to the Charlestown Ecclesia. I assume I'm up here because I'm a parent, an imperfect parent, but a parent as such. I've got 3 kids, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 6-month-old, so right in the thick of it.
I'm David Mansfield. I think most of you know me, but I go to the Campsie Ecclesia. I've been there all my life, the same ecclesia. I was baptised actually in Riverwood because we didn't have a bath in Campsie, but I've been at Campsie for over 50 years, still in the same ecclesia. I don't know why I'm here either because I'm no expert. Being in the same ecclesia, I'm an expert. I'm not an expert on boys. All right, so don't ask me any question about boys because my father was an only child, so I have no first cousins at all to play with, boys or girls. And I didn't know my grandparents from my mother's side, and then I had 3 sisters and 4 daughters. So ask me about girls and women and how they tick, but about boys, I'm pretty ignorant. So I'm going to learn from Austin, I think.
I can ask you about the girls.
Okay. I thought you already had a girl out there. Okay,
All right, thank you.
Okay, so I'm Beck Weatherton. I'm from the Blue Mountains Ecclesia. I have 4 of my own children, and I'm up here as the grandparent. I have 1 grandchild who was just turned 1 2 days ago, but I also deal with parenting and parenting issues and concerns on a daily basis and their consequences. So I suppose that's why I'm here.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Tammy Carroll. I go to the Blue Mountains Ecclesia. I, like Austin, I don't have kids. So I think I'm just up here as the young person.
Hello, I'm Dion Patch from the Lismore Ecclesia. Michelle is my wife sitting up the back there, and we have 4 children. We've just hit the teenage stages with our kids, so it's an uncharted territory that we're trying to navigate. And I suppose being from Lismore, it's like, if I excuse the pun, keeping my head above water. But interesting. See how we go tonight.
Great, thanks very much. The first thing I wanted to discuss was how has parenting changed over time? And maybe it's a question for the older ones, I suppose, but the world's changed and the way parents and children interact has changed, I think. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I suppose I can speak about time a bit more than anybody else here. I think it's become more complex. It seemed to me to be simpler, more black and white, and now it's so much shades of different colours and different greys and what you do and what you don't do. Plus, it not only is more complex by the look of things, but also it is busier. We have trouble keeping up with going all to the things that the grandchildren are doing. This last week we went to sports carnivals, Easter hat parades, swimming events, basketball days, and that was just one family who are here, the only daughter that I have here. And I just don't understand how we would have coped with all of that goes on. We were simpler. As I said, we just had girls, but that was easy. They just did girl things. So I didn't have to go to soccer and netball. We just went to netball. All right? But the complexity, I think, of parenting today and the use of, obviously, devices and that sort of thing it does my head in, really. I just like to keep things simple. That's why I've always been. I like to keep things logical because I've got this science brain that sort of goes into triage mode whenever I see something. And but when all this happens, this complexity of life, I find that very challenging.
And maybe that's one of the challenges of the day, to try and keep life as simple as it could be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And focused on what's important. Anybody else?
Yeah, so there's a very different approach to the social emotional development of children these days than there was in previous years. It is a lot more busy, and I think back to my childhood and to discussions that my grandma used to tell me that life was very simple. They'd go out as an extended family. The washing day was this day. All the family was there. It was a lovely day, a lot of community spirit, a lot of support. And now I look at young families and go, okay, there's the influence of media. There's the very non-Christian based influence that is coming flooding through. As most of you know, Warren and I spent years living over in Singapore. So for us, we didn't sort of see the frog in the pot, the slow change that had happened in Australia. We came back to a massive contrast to what we left some years previous, and to us it was a stark change of values and systems and principles that were in place. And that's only gotten worse in the last couple of years. And I even just think of an example of my two daughters at university, my eldest one as opposed to my youngest one, the change of morals and the change of attitudes and perceptions that you have to agree with, you have to believe in, and this is how it is done, and a total rejection of godly principles. And that is influencing our families, our young families.
So Australia's become less Christian? Is that
Totally less Christian-based.
Yeah.
And these people, these influencers who think they know how things are done, they are the ones projecting their ideas, their thoughts, untrained, unsolicited, and certainly not godly, upon our communities. And that's a struggle for the younger ones to discern, because they're telling parents what they shouldn't do, but they're not always telling them what they should do.
Yep. Okay. Do you have any thoughts on how we can deal with that? Because I guess when we grew up, perhaps, and I'll speak for myself, you went to school and you actually did religious education, and you got a Christian education, even at the public school.
Yes.
Whereas now that's not happening. You went to Heritage College. I suppose that was Christian.
Yeah, I went to Heritage. I guess for young people, the way to tackle that is to make sure they have really good peer groups and friends. I was in Heritage when we went through the change of allowing people who weren't Christadelphian to come into the school, and I was lucky enough that I had a really good friend group, and I still do to this day, of girls who just love God so much. And they, for me anyway, they helped me through that so much. And that reality, like when you go from going to a school, Heritage was amazing and I loved my time there. And then when you go out to uni, it's like, whoa, people are not Christian. Austin probably, we are doing the same, or have done the same degree. And you're not encouraged to be Christian. In fact, it's discouraged. People think it's silly. They don't see the point of it. And I think making sure you have friends that pick you up and push you through those times is just the most important thing.
Was that your experience? And how did you deal with that?
I had a little bit more exposure during high school and primary school, so I never went to Heritage College. I went to a public primary school and a private high school, and that experience was, again, extremely formative, because it was the experience that I had. It wasn't just that there was no Christians. A lot of my friends were very intelligent, well-spoken guys, and these guys would actively challenge you on things. So one afternoon we were talking about the Bible and what I believe, and they come up to me and goes, what about that passage in Deuteronomy where they say you can't mix two fibres and you'll be put to death if you mix those two fibres? And me as a 16-year-old is like, what passage says what? Like these guys were really intelligent, and it kind of forced me a little bit to be on my game. But the flip side, I totally agree with what Tammy was saying. The building of a strong Sunday school, I think, was essential. At Riverwood, my closest friends were at my Sunday school, and then over time, through stuff like Bible school, study week, conferences, that friendship group expanded. But the idea that the world is not Christian anymore, I'd agree with wholeheartedly, and it's challenging every value. So it's not just, don't be Christian, it's challenging the values that are associated with that. Why should you be honest? Why is there any value in being honest when you can, fake it till you make it, cheat your way to the top? They're the actual values of being deconstructed, or that's the experience that I've seen both in high school and at university.
Did you have enough preparation for that? And if you reflect back, you said you did have good, upbringing and so on, but what would you have liked more of?
In terms of preparation, again, when I was in primary school, all the time, I'm just like, I wish I was at Heritage. Because all my friends were there, they were having such a great time, and I was out kind of almost isolated a little bit. In terms of preparation, I kind of was prepared since primary school. I mean, I've been interacting with people with different faiths. My primary school was like 90% Hindu, so that was a completely different atmosphere and applying faith in that way. And then when I got to high school, it was more atheist, agnostic kind of principles. In terms of how I could have been prepared better, perhaps how to talk about the Bible with your friends. That was really tough in terms of my friends. I had a good group of high school friends who were interested in what I believed, but sometimes I felt unprepared to have that conversation, or perhaps I'm not the best person for that conversation. And sometimes that meant that I wasn't able to go in what I truly believed that deeply. I'd say proudly that I was a Christian, but did I actually say what that meant for me? How did I apply that in my life? Other things that I do, other things that I don't do. So in terms of how I could have been better prepared, definitely how to engage in a spiritual conversation with someone who is an atheist, or someone that you actually are quite close friends with, and you don't want to get into an argument or a screaming match about who's right or who's wrong. You just want to present your opinion and present, our faith, our hope, and how important that is to us.
I was thinking, Dion, you said you're getting teenagers on the way and all that sort of stuff. What are your thoughts about schooling and what you're going to be doing to prepare them?
So we've a little bit unique in this respect, not so much in the Northern Rivers, but we've actually pulled our children out of school. Oh. So we're homeschooling now. That has been really good on lots of different levels, but challenging on others as well. So the schooling that they get is what they see at home.
Oh. Is that because of the quality of education or what they were experiencing?
No, the quality of education at this Christian school that they were at was phenomenal. It was great, and they actually put a lot of effort into the kids. Even their disciplinary process was based upon the fruits of the Spirit. They were actually very, very good in that respect. However, there was obviously the challenges of the modern decade that we live in, with all these different ideologies and narratives that we're hearing more and more and more, was actually starting to infiltrate into that school as well. So to be a teacher there, you had to be a practicing Christian. So every teacher fit that criteria, but there was some ideologies that were coming in and being taught in the classroom from a Christian perspective, which was wrong and was not godly. It was not in line with the scriptures. You don't pull your kids out of school because of that. You talk to your kids about that. And we would have been quite happy to leave them there, as long as we keep that touching base and talking about those sort of issues. But the issue was for us is there was, without going too deep into it, there was other reasons why we thought, we only get one crack at these kids, and we can either send them to a school where another Christian group brings them up, or we bring them up ourselves. It was interesting, the comment that when the head teacher came to us and said, look, I really want to know why you're pulling your kids out of our school, because we love your kids, they're great, all that sort of stuff. And when we told him, told them our reasons, and he actually said to me, he said, you know what, I think it's going to be the way of every Christian family in the future to homeschool. Really? That's what he said. And the reason why he said that was because there was pressures that they were actually getting, not just from the governments outside, but internally as well. That they weren't on the same page. So we've brought our kids home. So our issue now is that how do we educate them and at the same time show them God and show them what God and the Lord Jesus Christ looks like in everyday life.
Oh, I hope that goes well. A question for anyone on the panel. If you think back to yourself as a child, a 12-year-old child, assuming your parents weren't listening.
My circumstance was I was geographically isolated from the ecclesias. So I remember one Sunday morning when we were going to Sunday school, I counted how many traffic lights we went through to get to Sunday school, and it was 127. So we lived in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and there were no other Christadelphians in the whole area. My peers were all Jews, and they were all through my life in primary school, in high school, and in university were very Jewish connections that I had, which was handy because when I was at school and the Jewish boys went off for the holidays, the Christian boys would say, what's the holiday? And they said, we don't know, ask Mansfield. He knows more about it than we do. And that was handy. And when we had a 25-year reunion, I got together with a couple of the Jewish boys, and we were talking about things because they understood my position with Israel and all that sort of thing, and our affinity as Christadelphians. And one of the guys went past. We used to call them the jocks, the athletes, the guys, who were into the football and the rowing and everything. And he said, "Oh, look at this! The Christadelphian and the Jews still talking together." And I had no idea he knew I was a Christadelphian, and that was 25 years later. So to answer your question, what would I have done differently, because that was my circumstance, was I would have probably should have involved myself more in ecclesial activities and young people's activities than I did, because I was happy in my own space. I was isolated, but I don't need people.
Right. Self-sufficient.
I had, I kept it to myself. I did my own thing. I didn't interact with, I didn't play with my sisters, sort of thing, So, and my best friend was Rob Hodgkinson, who was in San Susie, and he was ages away. But the two of us used to get together. But I should have, and we would have been better to be more involved in ecclesial life and our peers to be able to be helped and to help, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think for me, there's two aspects to it. I very much resonate with Austin in the sense of I now have young children. I feel very incapable of raising them in this environment in a way that will lead them to God, I guess. But I think as well, for me, it was you have such an influence on the people around you, and exactly as you say, like, people recognise the simple in the way you talk, in the way you behave, that there's something different about you. I see it at work, and I definitely had it at school as well. And I think potentially, if I go back, I would have liked to utilise that more in understanding the type of influence, just simply in how I behaved in my interactions with them. It wasn't necessarily talking to them about God, even though that is great to do as well. It can simply just be your behaviour and how you respond to a difficult situation or anything like that has a huge impact on people.
A lot of our conversations come back to the ecclesia and the opportunity we've got in this community to help one another bringing up kids. I think that's a real central sort of subject of parenting. Perhaps I can ask maybe Dion, what are you looking for from your ecclesia to assist you? What are the sort of things that count for you?
Yeah, so, I mean, the responsibility of bringing up these children is myself and my wife's responsibility. I don't think I'd ever place that responsibility upon the ecclesia. I remember being part of an ecclesia early on in life where, the Sunday school and the youth group at the time was blamed for their children leaving the truth. And if, no one knows these people, so I'm happy to talk about that. But when you actually looked at their lifestyle at home, it wasn't the ecclesia's fault at all. There was a worldly home that they grew up in, but yet the ecclesia got the blame for that. So I think the responsibility. What would I like to see more of? Well, I don't think I have the I don't know what the word is. Have the courage to say that I expect more from my ecclesia. I think that's obviously the responsibility of us of doing well. But what I do see from our ecclesia is the support that we get in lots of different ways. Like I could name people here tonight that if I had problems in my household, I could go to, and they would be there to support, to give advice, to help out, and they'd go to go to extra lengths. And I know they would. So just the support of your brethren and sisters that's in your ecclesia, and being aware of being there, not being people that want to, be nosy or intervene or interject and tell you how to raise your kids. But I know that there's people in my ecclesia that I'd only probably have to give them a look and they'd know what's going on. I'm not lying about that. I know that. So the thing that the ecclesia I see is really, really beneficial for parents bringing up kids is just the structure that we have. We've got youth groups. We've got Sunday school is huge. It's just, there's another person in the ecclesia that's got your kids for that hour of a morning and they're teaching them good stuff. Those little things are actually really, really helpful in the big picture. And I think as a community, and I talk to a lot of other religious people about this, and they don't have those setups. Sunday school's a thing of the past, and I think what we have in our Christadelphian communities is a really, really good structure. And we don't put trust in the structure, but it's the people that make up that structure is what makes it so valuable. So, yeah, I think, what's that saying about a community raise a... What was that, sorry? Takes a village to raise a child. There's so much truth in that because each and every one of us have that part to play. And when I look at the ecclesia that I have in Lismore and the Northern Rivers Casino as well, man, we've got some good resources there. And it's such, and mate, I take a lot of comfort in that.
Yeah, that's great. Yep. Anybody else?
The importance and value of community. There's a lot of families here. There's a lot of people here that have big extended families. There's a lot of people also here, I know there's a lot from my own ecclesia that don't have those extended families. Their ecclesia is their extended family. It needs the auntie to reinforce what mum's saying. It's the auntie to have a nice word to the child when you can see mum's absolutely had it. It's the auntie that walks in. It's the uncle that just steps in, reinforces the value, says exactly the same thing the parent says, but suddenly auntie or uncle says it and, auntie, uncle said this to me. And the parent rolls their eyes because they've said it 50 times. But the power and value of that, particularly as your kids get older and as teenagers, and that reinforcement and that community, it is vital. We are living here in Australia simply because of community. We lived overseas and would have continued living overseas, but the importance and the value of community can never be undervalued.
That's great.
I think just off the value of community, I can resonate pretty strongly with that. My mum's family isn't in the truth, so it always felt like I've got this family in the truth, but it's actually not as big as my true family. And my parents, again, it's not some extraneous measure, but they there was an old little saying in our house that we used to drive past 5 meetings to get to Riverwood. And that's not a reflection on the meetings at all, but it was on the Sunday school preferences that worked with us. It was the age group of the families that were at the Riverwood Ecclesia that was the driving factor, and I'm so grateful for that because from the age of 2, my friendship group has remained virtually the same. My best friends remain the exact same as I grew up with. And that value of community in terms of, similarly to the idea of having an auntie and uncle within the ecclesia, they actually do act like your auntie and uncles. And sometimes at Riverwood it feels like you've got more than one mum and one dad, which is a benefit, a blessing, and sometimes a hindrance. But it definitely, I think, on the whole, is a blessing because you feel that connectedness. And you feel that you really have a community that's willing to go bat for you and really willing to, bring you up.
I was wondering about that. I think definitely for our kids, they feel like they had 30 grandparents. That was the community. That was the community. That was the spirit in that place. And I'm sure it's in many places, but it's incredibly helpful. Speaking as a parent, to have that level of support. Reinforcing, as Beck said, reinforcing some of the principles you're trying to teach.
Just when my kids were younger and went to CYC and I went to CYC, there was a group of us that perceived a need also for junior CYC. And the reasoning behind that was that the kids that got to CYC, they had to be 14 or 15, I think, and they weren't allowed to be there before they were that age. When they got there, they were very young and they were disruptive. They were, they weren't contributing. So we thought if we can get them earlier, so from 8 to 14, and have an activity for them that was both fun but also biblically based. So we used to have a fun day and then we'd have a Bible marking activity every fortnight. And the idea was to get those kids to have something so that they could say to their peers when it came Friday night, oh, what are you doing and what are you doing the weekend? They could say, oh, we've got a group we go to that are doing these things and they're fun things, come along with us. And so that was how Junior CYC started up, and we were involved in that for quite a few years, and that was useful because that was my kids all went through that as well, and that formed bonds so that when they went to CYC, they already had the structure. When Heritage College came along, that need was less that now than it was back in those days.
Yeah, it did cross my mind. We were talking about ecclesias that have got good support. There'd be people in the audience that go to ecclesias that don't have that
well,
level
we're
of
only
support.
little.
You go to a small meeting,
ecclesia,
and that's where more of the combined events, and I guess people bring their children to Rathmines for exactly those sort of reasons. A slightly more challenging question. When you look around you at some of the parenting, and let's say parenting outside the truth, perhaps that's a safe place. What are some of the mistakes you think that people are making that we need to be thinking about and doing something different?
I think for me, I was thinking sort of about parenting, and I guess how I want to be as a parent. You know, I can only speak from experience of young children. I don't know what it gets to when I get to teenagers. It's all ahead of me. But, you know, I see... We spoke at the beginning a bit about how our whole society is moving away from a Christian society, and with that moves away from Christian values, which I think includes this value of family and how critical your family is, and having time with your family. And I see quite often this attitude towards sending your kids off to play with other kids, or put them in front of a device or whatever it might be so I can have me time. And it's all about how do I find time for myself. And don't get me wrong, I love time for myself, but I think it's important at times as well. But I think there's this real challenge for me in that's kind of where our society is heading. And I don't want my kids not to have friends, but at the same point I think I want the connection to be first and foremost with me as a parent before it then becomes their connection with peers. A 5-year-old raising a 5-year-old is dangerous. So I think it's really important that I try to do my best to avoid constantly trying to push them away to have my own time, and make sure that instead I'm pulling them in to be with them.
That's a great thought. Anybody else? We talked about how the world's changing before. How is parenting changing, and what are some of the things we need to look out for, do you think?
I always love a trip to the shops. I mean, I don't have children now, so...
I think that sounds like the fire alarm.
Just let me die. Not going.
I think...
All right.
Yeah.
Everyone please make an orderly exit out. I'm reliably told that whilst it was a false alarm, it was set off for a reason, so it wasn't a complete false alarm. So the system's working, so it's not a bad thing. I think the question we were on was, what are some of the areas we'd like to try and do better at parenting? And I think you were talking about going to the shops.
That was the cue to leave.
Yeah.
I always find it challenging walking into a shopping centre. I often pop into Coles on my way home from school, and it's kids witching hours, as in they're all ready before they're going to bed for the night. And I'm always just astounded by the amount of parents who just hand their mobile phone to a 6-month-old. Was last time I was talking to the mum, because she was standing in front of me in the queue. She's handed the kid the phone with a video running, and then something popped up on the screen, so she grabbed it off the child, something the child shouldn't have seen. The child just lost it in the shops. And then so, because the kids had lost it, she handed the phone back to the child, and something else came on, and she grabbed it all, and I was going, I can't handle this. Like, it just watching this was just, to me, torture. And just then the disconnection that some parents have with their children walking around the shop. Like, I'm used to go around and say, okay, go and get me 2 baked bean tins. Go and, you're talking, you're teaching them, you're counting with them, you're communicating with them, and that's actually a very serious issue we have going forward, is the effects of social media on our children. Children are coming to school, they can't talk, they can't articulate. So all this social emotional development that's being hindered, their language development, I mean, if you can't deal with a young child in a pram at that level, and I mean, I've had 4, I know they can be annoying, and if you're not, what I'm saying is if you haven't got a vision of how you want to bring up your kids and how you want to sort it, you're going to keep capitulating, giving in situations like that. I really feel sorry for you when you've got an 18-year-old and they're suddenly getting in a car and they have more power, you don't have any sort of sway, you've had no vision for them and you haven't inputted that into their lives. I think that's just very sad.
Look, getting back to basics of family life, and by no means am I good at this at all, but some of the observations that I've seen in amongst families is that we tend to really make our schedules busy. I don't know what it would be if you put your hand up. How many of us actually have a meal together as a family during the week? Hopefully most of us would put our hand up, but I get the picture from observations that a lot of that doesn't happen much anymore. And I think about what things are we actually putting into our lives. Now I'm going to probably step on a nerve here, but what about putting our kids into weekend sport? Just think about one kid's playing a different division in one area, and that's on a Saturday, and then you've got to take the younger child to their game. And I know we do that as a community a lot, but just as an observation, how much time do we actually put into that? And how much time does that take away from the family unit? Just something I'll leave with you on that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, but just think about how much we schedule into our lives that take away from that family time. So when you say, what do we do better? I think maybe what we may need to do better is actually just sit back, hit the reset button and think, well, what are we going to do to actually make sure this is a godly family household? I mean, you think about what Deuteronomy 6 says, you talk to them about when they're lying down, when they stand up, when they're walking by the way, when they go out that door, the law's written on that door. Like, what are we replacing all that time with? And is our busy schedules that we just happen to get caught up in because that's the society we live in, how much does that really actually impact our lives?
I'm hearing you say be deliberate about the decisions we make.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that's just observation. I'm not good at that either, okay? But just looking around and seeing the busy schedules of families and what we actually choose to fill up our lives with is this being a hindrance to a godly life?
So having a strong vision and being very deliberate about what you choose to do and choose not to do. Yeah. Less is actually more heading one way.
What about, I think I did ask this question before, but I'd like to ask it again because I'd like to give it more, and we've just had a bit more of a conversation. Things that you think about your childhood that you really valued, that you thought were really important. What comes to mind?
Things that I found important in my childhood.
That were really important, that made a difference.
I think Sunday school's been talked about a lot. Yep. And I used to love Sunday school growing up. And I still have a lot of those friends today. And I think looking forward to learning and seeing your friends when you're a kid is really, it's just the best. Like, I think Sunday school was something I look forward to a lot and got a lot out of. And it builds your knowledge. I think something we're losing a lot is our knowledge. I was talking about this with Austin in regards to uni. AI is so clever that I think Austin said he's lost half his brain or something. And
they didn't have much.
Yeah,
I did say that.
He did say that. I think, especially for these younger ones growing up, like you have a uni assignment, you put that in. There you go. There's your answer. You have a talk to do. Put that in. There's your answer. And I think young people. Kids are so clever when it comes to technology. It's kind of scary how quick they are at using it. I think knowledge is getting lost, and I think that's something that's really important. Like what Austin said, when he was growing up, he'd relied on his knowledge to communicate with other kids about God, and I think, Sunday school is a super important part, I remember, and I think we're losing our knowledge around the Bible and Scripture. Yeah.
Yeah, really important.
Off that idea of knowledge, something that I appreciate in hindsight and didn't appreciate at the time was that my parents pushed me pretty hard in a lot of things. My dad especially isn't one to really accept averages. Like in most aspects of my life, it is you do it to the best standard and you do above average. And that principle was also applied to our walk in the truth. It's not about, being perfect, but it's like, settling for just, I am what I am and, I can't do anything about this isn't good enough. You've got to be always striving for better. And I think that lesson I took away through a lot of trial and error and a lot of drilling into me. But that application I try to apply in everything. I try to apply it, in the workplace, in my friendship groups, with my relationship with God, with Bible study. It's not just settling for what's easy or settling for, this is I'll scrape by with this. This is the passing grade. I want, and something that my parents fostered is a need to be better. And again, there's.
So you look back on that favourably.
Favourably, yeah. I was.
Were you favourable at the time?
Definitely not. No,
Yeah.
I was. No, when I get home and I'm like, look, I got this grade, and Dad goes, nope, that's not good enough. That was not particularly a fun experience, but it really did teach me a valuable lesson. Is you need to try hard. You need to work at everything that you do. And the most important thing to work at is your faith. That is the priority. And whatever you do, you need to be building your faith, consistently building up your faith and not stagnating and settling for, I've attended meeting this week. That's the best I could do. That's my average. It's going to meeting, it's pulling something out of it, it's applying it in your life and doing it week in and week out. And
How did your parents help you do that?
In terms of, it was when a lot of it was when I'd say, this is a weird example, but the Sunday school exam, for example. Sunday school exam, there was a bit of I don't really mind how I go. And my parents were like, no, you get into your room, you bring out your little Sunday school book and you highlight until the highlighter runs out of ink. But it was more just the idea that you're not lackadaisical about how you approach the Bible. It's not, you do it on your own time or, you put in whatever, spare time you have, you make that your priority.
Right.
It's funny you should say that, Austin, because my experience was the very opposite, with the same end result. Okay, so my grandparents were the greatest influence in my life, particularly my grandmother. I had a lot to do with my grandmother. She was needed care for most of the life, and she lived with us for much of my teenage life, and I was the primary carer. So it's like, if you can imagine having to look after someone in a nursing home. She was in a wheelchair, and I had to do everything, the toileting, everything for my grandmother. Okay, so I had her there, and I had her in my head the whole time talking to me, and her focus was on the truth and on the ecclesia and supporting other people. My grandfather, he passed away when I was in my late teens, but I just remember one Saturday when I was studying, I was probably in year 10 or something like that. I was up in my room studying, and I heard him grit his teeth and says, "What's Stephen doing up in the study? Tell him to get out and sell something." In other words, because he was someone who supported the work of the truth, and he was in the background. No one really knew my grandfather. I have got his Bible. My sister's allowed me to have his Bible, and in the front of it, it has an endorsement from Brother Stephen's grandfather, Uncle Perce, which was my grandfather's younger brother, and it just has in there 1957 to Eric for constant liberal support, Perce. And that was my grandfather. So he was behind the scenes, and he said, no, you didn't need knowledge, you need to support the ecclesia. So he was the Zebedee, and my grandmother was the Salome. She was very spiritually minded, and she just got me there. And I could come home from high school, and she'd get me to play Chinese checkers with her. She'd been in a wheelchair, and get me to make a cup of tea. It's actually the way she wanted it. She was very Victorian. you had to put the milk in last and the sugar in first and boil the tea leaves. And if I changed it around, she knew. She could hear. I don't know how she did. Anyway, but she was there and just getting spiritual principles into my head. And I look back and I see what she did. And she was giving me information to say, focus on the truth and the work of the ecclesia, and you had to be there full time. And my dad continued that, and he said, I don't care what you want to do in life. If you want to go to university, that's up to you, but you are coming to Bible class on Wednesday nights, the lectures, and you are not going to miss anything. And it didn't matter if on Thursday morning I had a major exam, I had to be at Bible class.
On Wednesday night.
Wednesday night, and that was always my life. And I just had to prioritise my life around the ecclesia, and that to me was invaluable. I look back and I think that was wonderful. Yeah.
It's a great segue into the next sort of area that I wanted to talk about, and that is the role of grandparents. You're now a grandparent.
Yes, yeah.
What's the role of grandparents, and how is that different to being a parent?
Again, from my own grandparents' example, being constant, okay, having a focus and being unchanging and constant is what I try to do. Be the same, not to vacillate, not to make any differences between anything else. Say, no, this is what we do, this is why we do it. Like Jesus, last week before he goes to be crucified, he went in front of his disciples and said, follow me, this is where I'm going, I want you to come with me, here's where we're heading.
It's different to being a father, being a grandfather.
It is. Being a father is more trying to train up the child in the way it should go. To me, being a grandpa is going in front and saying, this is where our family is always heading. Come with us. It's a great place to be. Yeah.
Right. What about being a grandmother? Yes, you're a grandmother.
Yes, I am a grandmother, yes. It's interesting to reflect. I remember sitting in hospital after I had Sarah, because she's my eldest. I was 21 years of age, and that realisation hits you that your life is about to take a very different path. And just sitting thinking about, well, what's that going to look like now? I have this child, I have to bring this child up. And then trying to work out, okay, well, this is what I want at the end, but so at teenage, what should I be doing? As a young child, what should I be doing? As, trying to look at each stage of life and work backwards. And then when Frankie was born and I went in to see Sarah, I remember having that exact same feeling, this overwhelming love, sense of responsibility, and just picking that child up and I go, I want you in the kingdom. How am I going to do this? What did I do with my kids and how do I have to do that now with my grandchildren to make... That's the most important thing. Nothing else matters. And just remember that feeling and just then going, okay, what did I do with my kids? How did I do it? But I didn't have the responsibility of having to feed them, get up in the middle of the night. It's pure love. It's pure joy and going, okay, well, we have to make sure, education, spiritual education, I have to do this, I have to do that. But you do it with a different perspective. I think that's the difference. And I just remember thinking, okay, well, there's time for, special time for family holidays. You have to be there for those important events, those milestones to support them. Always sit there and read him his little Bible story because I'm a teacher as well. I'm worried about his literacy development. But the important thing is I'm reading him Bible stories, you know what I mean? Those priorities. In a different sense, I can sit back. I can reinforce what obviously my daughter and my son-in-law are doing it with a very different perspective. But just that's the vision, that's where we're going. How can I support you and help you to get there?
Were your grandparents important in your life?
Yeah, so my grandparents are some of the best people I know. And they're really good examples of... I look at them and I'm like, if I'm ever a grandma, I want to be exactly like they are. I'm trying to think of... they're just... Again, I know I say the best, but they're actually just amazing. Their love for each other... They have so many grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and they pay everyone special attention. And whenever you're with them, they always talk about God. Grandma always will... She loves to talk, so she'll always talk a long time about what's going on in the Middle East and everything that's changing. And as a kid, you'd go to their house and you would sit down. It is in front of a TV, but they would play you a lecture from some old guy giving a really old lecture on like one of those tape things, probably. And
Sounds great.
yeah, I don't know what they're called. And just from a young age, you knew they loved God, and you knew that they wanted you in the kingdom. And whenever you're with them, you feel so much warmth and love, and you know that they would do anything for you and anything to get you in the kingdom. So they're actually two of the best people I know.
It sounds a bit similar to what you were saying before.
Yeah.
You had grandparents?
I did have grandparents, would you believe?
You still have grandparents?
Still have quite a few. I actually had grandparents on one side that were Christadelphian and grandparents on another side that were Catholic. And
Which one was the greatest influence?
I think just naturally, because I was brought up as a Christadelphian, they became the greatest influence for me. We also spent a lot more time with them. They were based around where we are. So just naturally, I think that led to them being a greater influence. But they, I guess, again, very similar. They're just loving people, and probably that exact same process of they don't have the responsibility of raising you. I think there's still a little bit of responsibility around discipline and other things for you, but at least my experience with my kids' grandparents is all they do is give them everything and love them. And I do a lot of the disciplining, but I think that's really important. And I think everything you do, whether it is discipline, whatever, it all has to stem from that love. And if they feel that love first, then, they're more likely to learn and grow from you as well.
You might have already answered this question, Dave, but I had a little section here on career choices, because I think that's a really important part that a parent plays, directing children in the right direction. And the world's changing, and we could probably talk about this as a separate subject, but you mentioned, if I understood you correctly, that your father almost said he doesn't actually mind what you choose, but the ecclesia comes first.
Yeah.
And maybe that's enough direction. I'm not sure. Or do you think there's more to it than that?
I never thought about it, but when I look back, my grandfather and my father had a business which would lend itself to me automatically going into it. And as I said, my grandfather was just about, working hard. The work ethic was huge. You worked hard. They hated laziness and indolence. So you worked hard, and the reason you worked hard was to support others. That was my grandparents lived in this. They only lived 8 houses away from us, but they had no water supply, and the house. It was the worst house in the best street. It was one of those things, and they were absolutely happy there, and they were doing that, and everything they did was focused on supporting the truth. All right, so he worked to support others. And that was what he did. And I look back and I think I would assume that they would think that I would just follow in the family business. And I never even thought that way, because I love studying. Okay, I just enjoy it. I found it pleasurable. So I used to study, and it turned out I was fairly good at it. They never stopped me or questioned me. But my dad said these were the ground rules. And I understood them implicitly. He didn't have to say it. I just knew that was what it was. And so that's the way it happened. So it happened naturally in a way, but they set a ground rule. They set the focus and said, here is our overall focus. You order your life, you structure your life so that you end that same goal that we're all going to. And that was.
Any other thoughts on careers and those latter choices that people make in life?
They often send people and families down very different trajectories based on those really important pivotal points in life and the choices that you make. All choices have consequences, and it's a really, really important thing to give a lot of consideration to, and it comes back, the priorities in your life, what are they? If God is your first priority, you will then make a different choice as opposed to money. I mean, in our home, we were encouraged to follow paths of study, but it was always God first. You had to be at the meeting, you had to be at Sunday school. Those were our priorities. Whatever fit around that became your life and your job.
I was just going to say, it's interesting. I hadn't actually thought about it till we were talking about kind of what parents were like, and I guess my dad actually had a career that kind of took him all around the world, so he travelled a lot, and therefore I guess wasn't always present at every Bible class and every Sunday night and every whatever. But in no way, I guess, did that ever make me feel that his commitment was less to that just because that was where his career took him. So, I think that's just my experience that I had, and it was just interesting listening to it then, thinking about, did that have an impact? But I actually don't feel that it was negative towards me in any way.
Yeah. Our time is gone. So I want to give a real special thank you to the panel. I know it's not easy to be here. Nobody wanted to be here, but it was really nice talking to you. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yep. We're going to finish now. Yeah, give them a round of applause.